Hello, listeners, and welcome back to State of the House. This is a bi-weekly podcast hosted by me, Jill Krowinski, Speaker of the Vermont House. Each episode offers an inside look into Vermont politics, legislation, and the experience of working in the Vermont House of Representatives. We will have conversations with legislators, staff, advocates, and Vermonters from all walks of life. State of the House brings policy discussions to the table in an engaging way. All right, welcome to State of the House. Today we're going to be talking about public education and how we pay for it, all things education on this podcast today. I'm excited to have some guests here. You want to kick us off and introduce yourself, Peter?
Sure. I am Peter Conlon from Cornwall, and I represent 5 small towns in Addison County, and I'm the chair of the House Education Committee.
Great.
And I'm Chris Taylor. I am the vice chair of the House Education Committee, and I represent Milton and Georgia.
Feels a little awkward because you all know me, but I'm Emilie Kornheiser. I'm the chair of the House Ways and Means Committee, and I'm from Brattleboro.
And I'm Representative Bill Canfield from Fairhaven, and I serve as vice chair on the Ways and Means Committee.
Great. Thank you all for being here today. All right, let's dive right in. Peter, I'm going to start with you with the big question, which is, how would you describe the current state of Vermont's public education system?
I think from a high level, I would call it fragile. We've got a number of areas that are challenging, from the condition of our buildings, which we determined to need about $6 billion worth of repairs across the state, to a shortage of high quality, experienced teachers in front of our students. We have many schools that are operating with teachers who are on provisional or emergency licenses. And we have a funding system that is challenging for communities to support the level of spending that is really needed for schools. That being said, closer to the ground, I think what you see is a lot of great work by dedicated people. And I think anybody walking into a school or into a classroom would be heartened by what they see.
Thank you. All right. So I'm going to turn to you next, Chris. What do you think is working well, and where do we need the most urgent change?
Well, we have a very dedicated teachers and staff here in Vermont. We have some great programming through what I believe to be great programming through the flexible pathways and our CTE programs here in Vermont. And we also have a really good focus on equity in funding. Whether we've achieved that yet or not, that's another question, but that segues into my most urgent needs right now, I believe, is to really figure out the funding mechanism for education in Vermont. I think it needs to, we definitely need to be working on our transparency and definitely our predictability for school boards.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a great segue over to Emilie. So I know this is a very big question, but I think it's important because we do talk about how complex the way that we fund public education. So can you give a high level explanation of how Vermont currently funds public education?
Absolutely. So the math is complex, but the math is complex for our income taxes. The math is complex for most of the math that underlies, civilization. But at its most basic, what we do is school districts get to decide how much they want to budget and how much they want to spend to meet the needs of the kids and the families that live in that school district. They tell the state how much they want to spend and how much their voters are willing to support for them to spend. We add up all of that spending, and then we raise taxes sufficient to fund all of those budgets altogether. We then adjust it based on the fact that we have a statewide grand list. That's a sort of an extraordinary piece of equity here in Vermont. And we adjust it based on local spending. But at the end of the day, we have a statewide fund and we pay for all of the local decisions at the statewide level.
Great. Thank you.
Welcome. You didn't think I could do it in a few sentences, maybe?
Hey, I think you did it under 2 minutes, which is very impressive. Yes, absolutely. So, Bill, I'll turn to you next. What do you think makes our system unique, and what challenges does it present?
Well, statewide education property tax. Local districts, as Emilie was referring to, they submit to the Department of Education approved budgets approved by each board. December, January, February, most of them. Okay, and then local budgets are voted on at town meeting day. However, as Emily talked briefly about the grand list assessment date is April 1st after they voted. And the yield bill isn't decided upon and passed until May. So the difficulty is the taxpayer doesn't know exactly what he or she is voting for on town meeting day.
Yeah. And so I'm going to follow up with another question for you, Bill, which is I think we all have very serious concerns about rising property taxes. How do those tie into the way that we fund education today?
Well, we have three different tax rates. We have the homestead rate, the non-homestead rate, and then the income yield rate, which is the
It's how you
income tax credit. That's right. So nearly 70% of our folks in Vermont file using the yield rate, the income yield rate. So with a statewide property tax formula, lower spending districts still are still charged the tax rate for statewide, which it comes out of the yield bill. So we need to try to bring some equity into the equation as we discuss reforming ed funding in Vermont. The Slate Valley Union, Unified Union District, I went to their board annual meeting last night. $11,783 they're going to spend per student. And they're still up 5.6% after they made cuts. And last year they spent low and it took them 5 votes to get it passed. So there's some frustration there.
Yeah, like that. I remember driving through town for their last vote and seeing vote yes for the budget on bales of hay. And I thought, really, yeah, people really cared about getting that budget passed. I'm glad it did on that one. All right, so Peter, back to you. Declining enrollment has been a major discussion point here. How should we be thinking about this issue right now?
Well, it's, Vermont's demographics, and this is one of the demographic issues, is challenging in many areas, including healthcare. In education, if we look back over the past 30 years, we've gone from about 120,000 students statewide to about 83,000. Now, if you sort of divide that into how many schools is that? How many high schools of 500 kids is that? It's a lot of schools. In the district where I served on the school board for many years, classes there, back when my kids were in it, were about 160. Now they're at about 120. So that's 40 kids per grade less. But if you add that over 12 grades, that's about 500 fewer kids in that one school system. Now, our elementary schools are about 75 kids at most. So you think about, has the state adjusted to this new reality of how many kids are attending? And, perhaps we've hit a plateau, we've bottomed out number-wise, but it's hard to know whether declining enrollment isn't continuing. So, if we, I think it says that we need to be thinking hard about what is the right size of a school system for us to maintain in Vermont, because every building you have has to be staffed at least minimally with a number of adults. And that can cost money. Plus, every building needs to be heated and taken care of and fixed up and maintained and all of that. So it has it has an impact on the cost of education in Vermont. And so, it also, every school across the state on average probably has capacity. So we need to think really hard about how we want to use our school buildings, how we want to have, what size classes do we think are the right size classes from a teaching point of view, but also from an economic point of view. So our declining enrollment is really needs to be driving a lot of decisions that are not just financial, but also what's best for kids and how do you have enough kids, enough scale to provide the same opportunities throughout one district, throughout the state, throughout that county. So it really is a major part of the discussion that we're having.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Chris.
Yes.
So what role should the administration and the legislature play in ensuring that all Vermont students have access to high quality education?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that the role they should play is, more of making broad policy for the districts while ensuring accountability and providing resources to decisions, so decisions can be made more on a district level. They also have a responsibility of making sure that there's equitable funding that supports students fairly across the state.
Mm-hmm. All right. So this question's for all of you. Be prepared. Jump in for this. All right. So there's often debate about balancing state oversight with local control. Where are you on that spectrum? What are your thoughts?
I was a school board member for 17 years. And so, you would think I would be a major local control fan. The challenge is that we spent most of our time on the school board deciding how much we could spend, how much voters could absorb, and the condition of our buildings and whether we needed as many buildings. These were hard conversations where if the state had played a bigger role in some of that, it would free up a school board to really think about the future, what it wants to see for education of its kids. It would free up just a lot of capacity and bandwidth among the people locally, with, I think, being able to exercise a certain amount of local control over the things that they consider to be important, which is how the education is delivered, given the limitations they may have, and how to make sure that every child in that district is preparing for a future outside of school. The way we have it now, a lot of time is taken up both for the professional staff and for school board members on very challenging, hard decisions that often have very little to do with what goes on in the classroom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 17 years. That's a long time. Thank you for your service. I think serving on the school board is probably the hardest job. And so shout out to all Vermonters serving on school boards. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you so much for your service. All right. Who wants to go next?
For me, I'm kind of a local control person, but I'm also a realist. And I realize that there are definitely some aspects that don't fit very well in the local control capacity. And I think that's where we, as a legislature, the state body needs to kind of step in a little bit and help out in those situations.
So I think that for statewide control, we need to get it right and make it most palatable and acceptable to the local folks who are concerned about losing local control.
Yeah, I think those details really matter for communities, for the kids. One thing that we haven't really talked about today, which is our Constitution, right, in Vermont. And we have this extraordinary thing in our Constitution, which I think very few other states do, which is this right to public education under our common, as part of our common benefits clause. And what that means is that it's the state's responsibility to have that equal educational opportunity, right? Mm-hmm. And when the state already has that responsibility, right, we can't decide who has the responsibility. Our Constitution already decided who has that responsibility. And so what followed from that was this extraordinary piece of equity, which is, right, the statewide education fund and the statewide grand list. And with all of those pieces, I think it becomes really hard for local districts who are making sort of those local decisions about how much to raise to be able to have the statewide view of how their decisions are impacting their neighbors. And so I think sometimes because of that, we wind up with communities pitted against communities or communities blaming other communities. And it's not their fault. All they have is sort of the view of their own budgets, right? And so I hope we can find a path that really sort of leaves the decisions that are appropriate for local communities to be making about their own kids, but sort of maybe balancing them out a little bit better with the impact on neighbors or an obligation for equity for all kids. Because I think right now, I think we have a pretty good balance between local and state control, but I think some of the incentives that we've built into that aren't balancing each other out very well.
I might add to that, we also need to constantly rethink what we mean by local, what we mean by community.
Yes.
Because, it used to be for many, many, many years defined by our town.
Right.
And then as we've gone to sort of larger school communities, such as Union high schools, we've rethought that. Act 46 sort of spread that even wider to small towns that feed into larger high schools, but then became part of one district. And I know that it's really made a lot of people think about all of the kids and all of the towns that feed into perhaps a Union high school as local kids. But we are being challenged quicker and quicker to redefine community and local when it comes to education, just based on our financial realities and our declining enrollment.
I remember sitting at a town meeting with a neighbor and her just turning to me in the middle of the debate and saying, we really need to start thinking about the kids in the town next door as our kids too. Mm-hmm. And that really, it stuck with me. It was well before I was a legislator, and it's really stuck with me through all these years about why wouldn't I think about the kids in Dummerston or Vernon as, kids I care about too. Of course I do.
We always, when I was on our school board, we always wanted to make it so that every kid that entered the Union Middle School, no one would know what town they came from based on their learning experience. That was really one of our main goals. That's how we need to keep thinking going in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So at this table, we have leadership represented from both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. Where do you all see opportunities for common ground?
I think there's actually a lot of opportunity for common ground. I think we can, right off the bat, can agree on some of the bigger aspects of this plan, the proposal that's been put in front of us. I think we all agree that we need to right-size Vermont education somewhat. The sticking point is, what is the right size? We maybe have some different decision points there to make. I also think that we definitely know the funding mechanism needs to be fixed. So there's points where we already agree. It's just going to be the path that we take to actually get to the outcome.
Yeah.
I think as long as the Republicans agree with the Democrats, there's a lot of common ground. No, but I do think, we are all focused on wanting to do what's best for Vermont's kids. I think we all understand the challenges that are out there. And, I think there are areas such as what Representative Canfield brought up about that some districts are really spending a lot less than other districts and aren't really able to provide their students the same opportunities that their neighboring district might because of the decision voters make and the challenge of our funding system. I think we can all agree that we want all kids in Vermont to have the same opportunities.
Absolutely. Totally agreed there. I think we all agree that sort of rapid changes, dramatic changes in our property taxes don't work for anyone. I think we all agree that we need to change the way that kids access education so they can have consistent opportunities. And I think we all agree that we need to look at the agency of education's role in all of that and make sure we're sort of everyone's on the same page with that, and school boards and schools are getting what they need. It really is. It's just in the details that matter. And in my experience so far, and I don't want to, overquote you, Peter, a lot of these issues are about geography or economics, and they're really often much less about party. And so I really hope that sort of within the party system and in a nonpartisan way, we can bring everyone into this conversation, because I think there's something, as we do our work, that everyone can benefit, because all of our kids really need the support.
With that, we have a unique opportunity to work together to come up with something that's going to help the taxpayers, help the children. And there's going to be to quote one of your previous deliveries on the floor, Peter, there's going to be something in it for everybody to love, and there's going to be something in it for everybody to dislike. So we can come together, help the children.
I appreciate Emily quoting me because education is something that tends not to be politically party oriented, but much more what your experience is and where you're from oriented. So it's going to be incumbent on Republicans and Democrats alike to work within their own parties to bring people along.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so I'm going to go back to you, Peter. We've taken on some big education reform efforts in the past. Are there lessons learned from those experiences that we can take with us on this journey of transformation?
Definitely. Probably lesson one is that no proposal is going to make everybody happy unless there's magic money out there. But if we go back to just a short time ago when we implemented Act 46, while I think some people might say it was bumpy, it actually, for the vast majority of people, was implemented pretty smoothly. And that was, I think, based on bills that came through here that were well debated, but really a lot of groundwork laid by the Agency of Education to prepare everybody. I remember the secretary at the time was all over the state talking about how to be ready for this level of consolidation. It was an easier step than what we're talking about today because really we were mostly bringing together supervisory unions that were already working together, already had centralized a lot of functions together under one governance board. But it's really all about making sure that the field, especially because they're the ones who are going to have to do whatever we come up with, have clear guidance as to how you move from point A to point B. That, I think, is going to be key to the success of any reform measure that we make.
Can I add a little bit to that?
Yeah.
I think there are pieces that have been successful in 127 when we changed the pupil weights, things that were successful in 173 when we did special education reform, or Act 46, or even 60 and 68. But in most of those, it was either a fiscal reform bill or a governance and delivery reform bill. And I think because of that, they fell short of sort of expectations on the other side, right? So Act 46 was, I think, really successful in terms of governance and delivery reform, but people still talk about like, well, was there a fiscal benefit to that? And in some ways there was, but we can't really tell because it wasn't a fiscally focused bill. And so I think my hope for this process is in pairing the fiscal reform with the governance reform, we can really see benefits in each.
Mm-hmm. They have to work together.
So you need to work together.
That's the motion that we've been making. Mm-hmm. Like together. That's how we talk about it.
Emily brought up Act 173, which was our special education bill act that was passed back in, I think, 2018. And it's implemented. It had full buy-in really from everywhere. And it was designed to really alter the way we deliver services to students who struggle. And really, the goal was to come up with a better system that would also help bend the cost curve because Vermont spends a lot of money on special ed. But we just had one of the key consultants that worked with the AOE at the time and worked with school districts talk about that. And he said, something like that requires a minimum of 5 years of sustained support at the state level. And I would say that any sort of reform that we do, it's really about the field having the support it needs, in addition to clear, unambiguous guidance, but to have the support at the state level, not just for a year or two, but sustained over at least 5 years.
All right, Chris, you're up next.
Okay.
So the administration has been working on an education reform proposal. We saw the transformation PowerPoint presentation that Secretary Saunders gave last month. And I know that there's been a lot of work going on. Can you talk about the direction of the administration's proposal and just at a high level, what they're putting on the table?
Absolutely. I'm glad I got the easy question at the table.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, first, I guess I just want to preface this by saying to anybody that's listening to this outside of this building on February 25th today, This is strictly a proposal, and absolutely no decisions have been made on any of this language that's come before us. And in fact, just today we are supposed to start seeing some of that legislative language so that we can actually start to pull it apart a little bit more, have some maybe difficult discussions at times, and move forward with some things. But right now we have a proposal from the administration that is based, from what I hear and see, on the quality of education in Vermont, that might have the benefit of some savings to be included with it. It looks like we're going to be right-sizing education by making some larger districts, which adds a little bit of, I think, more than a little bit of equity to voice within the districts. We are going to, the proposal is looking at the actual governance of, what the AOE is responsible, what the State Board of Education is going to be responsible for. It absolutely has the funding mechanism included in it. Yeah, like I said, it's really just, even though we're this far into the session already, really we're just starting to scratch at the surface of actually being able to sit down and make some decisions about this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. And as we take on this work, we have you from education and you from Ways and Means, but almost every committee in the House is working on some part of this mission that we're on to make sure that our kids get a great education at a cost we can afford. And so we know that our House Human Services Committee is looking at pre-K, and our Commerce Committee is looking at CTE. We have all these different conversations also happening at the same time. So this is a huge policy mission that we are on, but I feel good about it, especially with the team of people that we have working on this. So thank you. So what should Vermonters expect next? So next week, can't believe it, is town meeting week already. And so our House members will be out talking, meeting with constituents. And it's really important for Vermonters to be part of this conversation and giving feedback. So we're getting feedback through town meetings. We're getting feedback through surveys that we're going to be sending out. It's really important that everyone has a seat at this table. So Vermonters, be on the lookout, be in touch with your legislators, and give us feedback as we continue on this path around education reform. Okay, so now we're going to move on to our next segments. Yay or nay? Okay, so I'm going to just get ready.
Lightning round.
Lightning round. Here we go. Pineapple on pizza. Yay or nay? Kornheiser.
Yay.
Okay. Skiing over snowboarding. Peter.
Yay, but I do think snowboarding's cooler.
Okay. Committee meetings before 9 a.m. Yay or nay? Canfield.
Nay.
Nay. Yeah. Not a morning person, or just no. Responding to emails after 10 p.m. Chris.
Yay, even though it should be a nay.
Mm-hmm. True. Watching other committee live streams for fun. Peter.
Not fun, but sometimes you just got to do it.
No. Allowing pets in the State House. Kornheiser.
Nay.
Oh, man. No. The Vermont right turn. No blinker. Just vibes. Yay or nay? Canfield.
No, because people get lazy, and pretty soon they're going to take a left turn without a direction light.
Leaving the State House before 6 p.m. during session. Chris, yay or nay?
Yay.
Eating lunch while still in committee. Kornheiser.
Nay. Don't eat while on the video.
No, good point. Good point. That could get messy. All right, next, there's such a good thing as too much maple syrup. Chris.
Yay. Controversial.
That is very controversial. We'll make sure to put Chris's email up on the screen. Okay.
Yes.
Said your feedback. All right. Next, you pulled an all-nighter to finish a floor report or a piece of legislation. Canfield.
Nay.
Nay. All right. That wraps up the podcast. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Our pleasure.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to State of the House. If you enjoyed the conversation, please share it with your friends and leave us a review on your preferred platform. If you have requests for future guests or questions you'd like us to answer on the podcast, please send an email to speaker@leg.state www.vt.us. This episode was produced and edited by Molly Moore and hosted by me, Jill Krowinski. Until next time.